words and language, just as in Atonement the delivery of the word cunt to Cecilia and to Bryony has totally different effects and terrible implications. The word, the unspeakable word, the starburst, you say, word, bitch in this book has an extraordinary power within the context of a row. It seems to me that's something that recurs throughout your work, of finding a vocabulary that you reinvent and give renew power to. And I'm fascinated by your relationship with period, because you've written about the 30s, about the 50s, about the 60s, and I wonder how you immerse yourself in those literatures and cultures. Do you simply remember, I presume the 60s, but when you were writing Atonement, did you have to get the literary context in your head, the sounds, the tone of voice and vocabulary?
I didn't do a great deal of research for Atonement apart from the Dunkirk stretches and later on the hospital stuff. The general flavour of Atonement in its country house period, I felt I knew. Maybe, I must have just known it from novels. Elizabeth Bowen summons up the country house in a rather bleak way, and sometimes Irish, more specifically Irish way. I think I had in my head a version of it that I thought would do. I didn't want to go floundering around having to visit National Trust sites, and I felt I knew enough to pull the wool over the reader's eyes, more or less. But it's interesting what you said about those two expletives. I mean, what a universe of time and cultural change separate them, in fact. It's very important that, I think, that all languages have swear words. And I always said to my children, only swear in anger. Do not let swear words become part of your punctuation. You do need a moment of blasphemy, as it were, to let off that little bit of extra energy. And that's why I was one of those people who deeply objected to things like FC UK shop, just playing a little coy game with the word fuck, robbing us of the power of these words. So there was always something to, the campaigners against bad language. They did serve a useful function. Those Mrs. Mary Whitehouse, they helped keep these words powerful. They didn't want these words to exist at all, but that was foolish. We need these words. But if we overuse them, they dwindle, and then we have nothing. So the word cunt in Atonement, even now, I'm pleased to say, still carries a lot of weight. When the novel was read aloud on the BBC, it became a bit of a matter for them, because never before on Radio 4 had this word made an appearance, but yet it was a real problem. Without the word, the plot becomes rather difficult to detect, even, and it had to happen.
Can I just return you for a second to the context for the word bitch in this novel, where
the starburst.
Eventually there is a confrontation after the disastrous night of sex. There is a confrontation on the beach, which is a marvelous escalation. And one of the pleasures of reading it is not only reading what you've given, the dialogue you've given them, but your understanding and the way you let them escalate in an adventurous and terrifying, dizzying way, an argument which equally they haven't properly done before. I mean, virgins to conflict.
Mm. Well, for a writer, it is always an exciting matter when you reach a point that you've always wanted to reach in the novel. And I wrote this, from A to Z. I mean, I started this right at the beginning, and I didn't hop around as I do with other books. But when I got finally my characters at the beach, I deliberately not thought. I made no notes about what they were going to say. And I wrote it a first draft fairly rapidly. Anytime when I was thinking ahead during the writing of this novel, I started to have ideas about what they might say to each other. I'd say, no, don't go there yet. And so I let it unroll. It was unpredictable for me what they would say. And it's then that I thought that I would offer Florence the rather pathetic bid she makes that they could live sexlessly together and that he could see other women. And she doesn't quite know the value of, or whether that's absurd or insulting. And his response tells her immediately it's all wrong, it was all her fault, she hadn't gauged it, and that he must know what the correct response is. He makes it. And then he's frozen in his pride, and she apologizes. He doesn't respond to her heartfelt apology, and she walks away. I should say also, and this just goes back to your first question, Chesil Beach, where else could I have a character turn and walk away and be watched for miles? I mean, so that she can recede, as it were, in the last sentence on the page in the landscape. We don't have deserts in England where you could walk away in quite that way from another character. And I've been thinking about this because I've been writing the screenplay on Chesil Beach. And having characters, what's known in the business as the David Lean shot in reverse. I mean, the famous opening of Lawrence of Arabia, where there's this sort of fuzzy, heat-warped thing that comes towards the camera. There is an opportunity to revive this shot for us. In fact, what I'm thinking of is doing it in the very opening, actually having the characters come towards us at the beginning of the movie. But yes, one of the pleasures of writing, I think, is when suddenly the drumbeat of the prose can change. You've permitted yourself this moment because you've restrained yourself in the past, and finally there is this outpouring, and it's almost as if you could hear, whatever Florence may say about drummers, someone beating some different kind of pulse, some other rhythm to which your pen, your keyboard is now going to. And that's why I would not write notes for this row. That's why I wanted the pulse of the prose to turn out what they would say to each other.
You're amazingly even-handed, almost mathematically so, in your distribution of time for the great majority of the book. And towards the end, you choose to tell their story only through his. I think you cover 40 years in a couple of pages.
Yeah, as a coda, yeah.
The overwhelming feeling for the reader is that what you, the narrator, are doing, among other things, is making a plea for male emotional sanity, and it's almost a specifically male crisis that emerges at the end of the book. Do you feel that's fair?
Partially, because Florence certainly had her own emotional problems too in this. Lots of people have said to me, well, why don't we get both of them right to the end of the book? Someone's got to vanish. I mean, it could be her, it could be him. But someone has to vanish, or else the reader doesn't feel the lack of someone. If you could inhabit both consciousnesses right to the end of the book, you would never feel the sadness of the disappearance. So I decided it would be him, partly because his life is less successful and rather scrappier. Hers is rather fixed. We know very little about it, except, and I know nothing about it.